All right, key number 5, agents act, plan, and observe. See, we are in the midst of a transition from AI providing useful information to actually helping do the work. Oftentimes we call this agent or agentic AI, and this is really exciting in the field of AI because these agents are able to carry out different tasks on behalf of the user. Now, the idea here is that we're transitioning from this concept of the LLM as a simple text generator to having tools that it can use to plan and act and observe. All right, now we're going to go through a couple of examples here, thinking about agents by asking a question, is this an agent? Right? So when we think about agents, we're going to think about a system that's going to do stuff for us, a system that's going to adapt based on feedback, or even a system that can coordinate multiple steps. So we're going to ask this question through a thought experiment as we build up our understanding of what is an agent in the age of AI. All right, so here's our thought experiment. You as a user are going to draft a LinkedIn post about Duke and AI. You send this prompt, maybe some context, to an LLM. The LLM is going to return it. Duke University is a top university for AI, right? You take that output, you then do the perhaps dubious act of posting this on LinkedIn. Now, is this an agent? I'd argue no, this is not an agent. You took all the steps. You were essentially having AI help you build a LinkedIn post. All right, next thought experiment. Let's say that you wanted to draft and post on LinkedIn for you about Duke and AI. All right, so you send that to the LLM. The LLM then writes the prompt, but then let's say that the LLM either can write code for the LinkedIn API or maybe even has a LinkedIn MCP and it posts it on your behalf. Is this an agent? I would say also no. This is essentially an LLM that's calling a tool to take the output of an LLM and use it as input for the next call. Okay, next thought experiment. Let's say you want to draft a LinkedIn post about Duke and AI, but now you want to have it create an image because we know images are going to make or break your LinkedIn post. So we send that to the LLM. The LLM writes the post. It then creates an image that is appropriate for the content of that post and sends it back to you. Would this be considered agentic? Also, probably not. This is just a multi-step, multimodal workflow. Okay, now, to be an agent, we need 3 steps. We need a step to plan, or sometimes we call it think. We need a step to take action, and we need a step to observe the outcomes. So, what does this mean? Well, when we think about this in the context of our LinkedIn example, let's say that we wanted to have the agent do some research and draft a post on LinkedIn about Duke and AI. In an agentic setting, this would then trigger a series of steps. So the first step would be to come up with a plan. The first part of the plan is do some research. The second part of the plan is draft content. And the third part of the plan is post on LinkedIn. Now, in this research, we end up then in this loop where maybe the LLM is going to go to Google, trigger a tool, do some web search, and come back. The important distinction here is that the LLM is going to make a decision if the research is done. And this doneness value is something that the LLM is going to infer based on your instructions. Now, you say draft a LinkedIn post. Well, a LinkedIn post needs to be a certain length, a certain number of characters, which is very different than do research and write a 5,000 word opus on some relationship between Duke and AI and et cetera, et cetera. So the context of done is going to then be inferred based on the task at hand. So the LLM then is going to repeat this loop. This loop then will continue until it's done, and then the LLM is going to move on to the next step, draft the content. and it drafts the content. It then determines, is that step done? Yes. Okay, move on to the next one. Post on LinkedIn. Is that step done? Then yes, it is. So this agent plans, it acts, and this observe part, this is the key idea. This observe is going to then observe the action and determine if the action is sufficiently completed before moving on to the next step of the task. So is this an agent? Yes, I would argue this is indeed an agent. So here's an example. I went to ChatGPT and I said, I will be attending the Triangle AI Summit. In order to prepare for the summit, please use the provided context to create a report that has the key issues and current events that will best prepare me for the summit. Ensure the report contains an executive summary in addition to detailed sections. So this was the idea. I said, I want to give it this information. This is my prompt. The prompt then is going to be a deep research prompt, and it's going to then trigger an agent to do research. But I want to also provide it a little bit more context. So back in video number 2, the second key was tools provide context. Well, in this case, I wanted to make sure it had the context for the Triangle AI Summit, and I didn't know if it was going to be able to find it. So I decided to go to the Triangle AI Summit webpage, copy that information, and literally pasted it in here, provided it as context. I use these XML tags. That's a little trick or tip that you can use to separate different types of information to help the LLM know where does the context start and end, where does the prompt start and end. And here's another tip. If you are going to be providing a large amount of context, do this first. The LLMs have this recency bias. So the last thing that they read before they start their task is going to be the part that is most fresh in their memory. So I'm going to provide context. I'm going to wrap it in these XML tags, and I'm going to dump it at the beginning of my prompt. Then I'm going to say, please do this thing, and this thing meaning write this report, provide detailed sections, give me an executive summary. And then what happens, to ensure specificity, OpenAI has built in this trigger where no matter how detailed of a prompt you give it, it will always ask for more details. To best tailor your preparation or report, please share your professional background, any specific points you want, and your current familiarity with AI. So of course, I say I'm an educator, I'm AI curious, and I know about and have used ChatGPT, but I'm hoping to learn from the summit. So I give it this little bit more context, and it says, great, I'll begin a report, and off it starts its research. And so what you can see here then is the agent is going and doing some web searches, taking these results and bringing them back in, and then saying, okay, I need to go back out and get some more results because I don't have enough context. I don't have enough results in order to provide the user the information that was asked for. And so this is where the agent came up with a plan and is now acting. It's doing this search, it's bringing back information. And then finally, it says, I'll let you know when it's ready. And then finally, when it's done, it will say research completed in 7 minutes, 23 sources, and 61 web searches. All right, so it decided that 23 sources and 61 searches was done. And now it can then come up with a Triangle AI Summit 2025 Educators Preparatory Report. And of course, because this was deep research and because it was going out and getting these web searches, it can also provide the sources of information. And the nice thing is you can then click on these, validate, dive deeper, and so on. But because this is not information from the model, this was information from tools. This tool is web search. We can then take that information, bring that in, and provide sources for the types of information that is being provided to the user. Now, if you would like to read the report, I'm providing it for you here. But of course, you can also go to this website and you can, I made this public, so you can go and see how OpenAI and ChatGPT made this report. All right, now, so this is key number 5. Agents plan, act, and observe. And it is only through this process that we call this an agent. But again, whether something is an agent or not an agent is less important than understanding how the LLM is chaining these different steps together. This is multi-step, multimodal oftentimes, using tools to provide context to give to the LLM to essentially perform this task for us. So our fifth key is agents plan, act, and observe. But before you go, I want to talk about some of the unique risks and limitations presented by agents. Now, agents are being used today. There are autonomous research agents. I showed you an example of deep research. There are content creation bots. I use this LinkedIn example because we can all see these social media sites are being proliferated with AI and bot-generated material. Now, this is amazing because this is all powered by these agentic loops. But because these are agentic loops, there are some of these risks and limitations that I need to share with you. The first is that hallucinations can propagate. What do I mean by that? Well, because these are agentic loops, let's say that we were going to have an agent book us a trip. And we say, okay, we want to visit Paris. Paris is really lovely this time of year. And the agentic AI is going to book us some tickets, and it's going to come up with an itinerary and perhaps even book a hotel. Because these agents work in loops, these hallucinations can propagate, meaning if you don't get the right Paris first, then you end up with an entire itinerary with the wrong Paris, and you'll end up in Texas instead of France. The second risk, again, because of the loop nature of these agents, is that the agents can fail to stop. So let's say there is a shopping agent where an agentic AI is going to probably suggest to you and encourage you to buy a handbag. You say, yes, this is a lovely handbag. And we say, okay, let's buy. Now, the agent is going to say, have I delivered the handbag? No, the user does not have the handbag. Press buy. Has the user delivered the handbag? No, the user does not have the handbag, and so on. And this failure to stop can mean that the agent will run this loop and loop and loop again until you end up with many, many, many handbags. Another example is incomplete reasoning. So let's say that there's an agentic AI that is doing triage in some medical care setting. And maybe a woman comes in and reports of fatigue and nausea and abdominal bloating and missed period. Now, the agent scans the past cases and suggests, diagnosis, mild GI upset and maybe some stress-related delay in menstruation. It recommends rest and hydration and no follow-up needed. Well, if the agent doesn't have all the information, then the agent could be missing some very key pieces of information in order to help this patient. Another risk is tool misuse. So we talked about how we're giving agents tools to go out and perform behaviors, provide context, write code, and so on. Now, when we give these AI agents tools, these tools could be misused. So here's a hypothetical example where we are going to have an agent post on LinkedIn on our behalf. And we could then say, here's a note, congratulations, and you can press the button and say, congratulate so-and-so on their work. Now, an agent then decided in this hypothetical case that we say, well, William really didn't do too much on this project. He only attended a couple of meetings, right? Or we could say, here's an agent giving you some information that says, would you like to buy this fast food? And it says, congratulations, you've eaten millions of calories over your lifetime. Or this final hypothetical example where let's say that you are posting something on like Facebook Marketplace and the agent then is going to say, try lowballing because this seller is really desperate. These are all hypothetical examples by this artist, Soren Iverson, but you could see a future where tool misuse could happen when you put these agentic AI in charge. Now, agents sound really helpful, but it's important to keep in mind that there's increased risk and an elevated importance of monitoring every step of the process, not just the output. When it comes to agent use, think of using agents when the cost of errors is low, when the task is structured or repetitive with maybe just a little bit of variance, or the volume would just be infeasible for a person to do. Now, on the flip side, you wouldn't want to use agents if the cost of errors is high, like financial or emotional. If the task is highly creative or even open-ended, you're not sure where it's going to go, or finally if it's a low volume or time isn't critical. Understanding these balances is going to be important to build and use these systems responsibly. So, this last key, agents plan, act, and observe.